Hey friends, the Dagger brush is my favourite brush, and I don't have just one. They're not all the same either. They are so many brushes rolled into one. You know, I see the round brush getting all the attention, and yet it's the one I use the least. I'd like to demonstrate the power of the Dagger brush through the process of painting a flower and explaining the process along the way. You can use the brush in so many different ways. Here are some of my daggers. This one here is a 1/2 inch Rosemary & Co dagger, my 1/4 inch Princeton Dagger Striper. These three are from Montmartre, Roymac Dagger, and a Da Vinci Casaneo. What they all have in common is a nice point, a sword edge, and the ability to hold more or less water. Today we'll cover what a firmish dagger brush can do, how it can replace some of your other brushes, and the magical effects it can create, along with something super special at the end. Today I'll be using some Arches 300 GSM cold press paper, my Rosemary & Co 1/2 inch dagger, the 1/4 inch Princeton Dagger Striper, and Daniel Smith paints of Quinacridone Coral, Quinacridone Violet, Sap Green, and a little bit of Cobalt Teal blue. It's important to thoroughly wet your brush. You can swish your brush on the bottom of a clean jar like this, and then tap off the excess water and pat it. And I always seem to go into my water twice, and then we can go to some paint. The next thing to do is make sure your paint is wet. If we take our damp brush and go into dry paint, we'll have to scrub way too hard and wreck our brush in the process. So after our brush has been completely wet and the excess has been taken off, you can now go into some softened paint and create a puddle of paint. Always shaping your brush into a flat shape by flipping it over and over. You can make circles if you like, turn it over and make circles, but don't do anything like that. That wouldn't be good for a dagger brush. For simplicity's sake, let's give our brush some parts. We have the tip, the sword, the back, and the belly. Just makes it easier when we go through. And I'm just going to use the sword, laying the brush down on the sword and then guiding with the tip of the brush just to create a round swoosh like that. And going into the paint again to make sure that I've got enough paint on my brush, and using the tip of the brush as a guide and the sword as the supply of paint, and we can very easily come around like this. I can turn my brush in all sorts of directions. I could turn my whole board around, or I could just move my brush around. Now, because I've done it like this, I'm coming in over the top towards the middle with the tip of the brush, brushing it backwards like this. And this is now acting as a bit of a round brush. For the leaves, I'm starting off with a little bit of Sap Green, which I'm also making a nice little puddle here. Just tapping out the excess, coming into the leaves, laying down the tip where I want the paint to go, and using the sword as the supply of paint. And turning it around and coming in on this one. Let's use the brush differently. I'm now going to flip my brush on its back. This is the back. And I might say I'd like to do it like this. So I press down onto the back, which basically gives me a stroke as if I was using a round brush. And as I lift the brush off the paper, my point is thinner and thinner. Now let's do this over here, and let's leave a little white gap for the vein. And incidentally, if you want to practice this on this flower,
That's great. I will leave a link to it in the description. Now I've used the brush just as though it was a round brush. I'm going to pat off the excess and mop some of this up so that we don't have any puddles in there. Why don't we just use the sword part of the brush and press down gently, and we can create these fine little lines for
this pretty little filler. Now you could achieve a similar result with the edge of a flat brush or perhaps even a rigger, but as you can see, we could do it all with the dagger.
So that's another stroke. Actually, so pretty, let's put some in here. And you don't really have to do a middle vein for this. You can just do the side ones, or you can do a middle one if you wish. I'm dipping my brush into paint again and wiping off the excess. What if we were to put in some other little leaves here in the background? I am going to press onto the point and press down onto the back. And I have made these pretty little leafy shapes. It's a different filler. And I can turn my brush the other way. And we have something in there that looks like that. Now, how about I show you something different? Again, I'm dipping my brush into the paint and wiping off the excess. This time I'm coming into this leaf with the tip of the brush right up there at the tip of the leaf. And I lay the sword down next to the vein. And I pull out. And if I do that again, I pull out, and I have created a lovely straight line for the future vein. I will blot my brush and pick out this extra bit of paint. So now let's go on to the other side of this, where our sword is the one that's going to make leaving this white gap ever so easy. So there you go. And I'm just going to think, what can I do with this leaf? Well, with the way I'm sitting here, it's not actually the most comfortable, but we'll put the sword down next to the vein and twist it around again for that nice soft round shape. And we'll do the same on this side. I've gone out of the lines, but that's what I normally do. Sorry. Okay, and I'll pat it, and I'll just pick up some of this to make sure it's nice and smooth. Alrighty, now we can also do it like this. I'm going to get some more green paint, and now that this leaf is in a better position, I'm going to come here next to the vein with the sword and pull it out, and then you can just do that again and you end up with a shape like that. So there are just so many different leafy shapes you can create with a sword brush, with a not a sword brush, oh, we could call it a sword brush. See those lovely little jagged edges? Now what we're doing is we're waiting for this to dry. Paint these leaves in, so I've pressed down on the back of the brush. I did it again, coloured it in. I'm going to leave a gap. It's working like a round brush now. And later on when we do the background, I'll show you how it can work as a flat brush. I know all these leaves at the moment are the same colour, but that's all right. So I'm leaving little gaps where you wouldn't normally have little gaps, but it does really help with the shape of the leaf and seeing where it's going. Like this one is folded over. I'm going to put the vein in there, and then instead of painting the bottom of the leaf right up to the leaf, if I leave a little gap in there, then the leaf will be better seen.
And it's time to let it dry.
I'm going to quickly dry this. Okay, it's dry now. So let's rub out the little bits that we don't need. Did you see the lovely runaway here from the dryer? Don't mind that.
If we could create an ideal background brush, well, I would like it to go into all the crevices easily. I would like it to have a fine point. I would like it to be nice and wide to paint big patches in one stroke. And voila, guess what? We have a dagger brush. For the background, I'll be using a bit of Daniel Smith's Cobalt Teal Blue and a little bit of the Quinacridone Violet that I've used for the red and the green. My Cobalt Teal Blue is in a little pan and I've just stuck some blue tack to the bottom of it so that it doesn't slip on my table or palette. To make it easier, I'm wetting down the top section of the painting first.
Now let's just go for some Cobalt Teal Blue and just drop some in here and there. And we can come in a little bit closer to some of these, but leaving a little bit of white space there works as well. I actually quite like it with a little bit of white space. See how the brush is working beautifully to go inside these little tiny shapes? I find it easier than using a round brush, I have to say. I don't know why round brushes have so much glory, but now I can wet quite a large surface with the sword of my dagger brush because it's large. Coming in with this, now look at this. I can come around the leaf, using the tip with the brush with the back facing the paper and the tip of the brush. And I can move some of this around because it's a little bit more there and less there. Nothing we're going to worry about. Here I'll be using the tip of the brush. When you use the tip of the brush with the brush back to front, you will change the tip of the brush. It's looking like this, which just means that when I dip it into paint, I need to make sure it's straight again. Now I am painting on a flat surface today. So I like those green strokes there. Can be part of the composition now. I use my sword to place a straight line where I need a straight line and then just drag on. Now into this, maybe just for the fun of it, it's all still nice and wet. What if I get a little bit of Quinacridone Violet? I'm going to use this colour to make the shadows of the red darker and the shadows of the Sap Green darker. So why not use a little bit of this in the background? Just a few spots here and there. Be interesting. Make some shapes that look a little bit leafy, like that. I think they work quite well together.
What do you think? Are you starting to see the benefits of this beautiful dagger brush and see why it's my absolute favorite? But wait for it, you haven't even seen what's coming up next. Leave a comment below and tell me what you think. Now let's wait for this to dry and move on to the special part of this presentation. Can't wait. It's time to give our camellia and leaves a little bit of form, and this is where all the magic happens. It's in the way we load the brush. I'm adding a tiny bit of Quinacridone Violet to my Quinacridone Coral just to make a shadowy color. I wash my brush, I tap it gently, the tip mainly because I'd like to keep the water in the belly of the brush, and then I dip the tip into a very creamy mix of paint. This is a close-up on another little plate just to show you exactly what I mean. The paint is very thick and creamy. This is actually straight out of the tube, or you'd have to have your pan paint very, very juicy, picking up the paint on the very tip of the brush. My brush is now loaded with 90% water and 10% creamy paint. I need to touch the surface of the paper with the tip of the brush where the paint is, and also with the sword where the water is. And this will give me an instant blend from deep rich color to water. Wow, my favorite. To do this, you do need to practice a little, and you do need to really respect your brush, because you dip it in water, you pat it gently, you got to make sure it's straight, and then just have a little bit of creamy paint on the end. And then why not pull in some fine lines from the tips of the petals? To get a smooth action, you may need to roll the brush between your fingers. I love using the 1/2 inch dagger because it holds plenty of water, but right now I'm going to pick up my 1/4 inch Dagger Striper for the tiny little petals in the center of the flower, but it holds a lot less water. I tend to wash, tap, and reload my brush after every 1 or 2 strokes. But I think it's really worth the effort. It's time to add a little bit of the Quinacridone Violet to the Sap Green to create some shadow color for the leaves. You can see the effect of the smaller brush being drier, and the benefit of having a larger brush that holds more water. Who would ever think you can get so much done with just the one brush? And now I'm using the tip of my brush to stamp in the tip of the leaf. And the tip of the brush for some little tiny dots and strokes. Now I'm back to using the straight sword edge of the brush to create tiny little straight strokes. With the tip of my brush and facing backwards, I'm able to create a few little berries. Just the same way that we loaded the brush 90% full of water and 10% full of creamy paint, you can also load the brush with any thin color and a little bit of thicker paint on the end with another color. And it's like double dipping, you could say. And here's a little sample at the end of it double dipped. Here I've used some nickel titanate yellow with a little bit of rich creamy pyrrole orange on the tip. So I do hope you've enjoyed this and that you give it a go and really get creative, and it doesn't matter which way you bend it or do anything with it, just enjoy it.